And welcome to the Scientist Sage Sangha. I'm so glad that you could join us tonight. As you can see, it's a little different background. I am resting in bed after a broken ankle, but the show must go on. So we're going to. And tonight, I didn't want to miss it or reschedule it because it just wouldn't be the same. Doing loving as the word for tonight's Sangha came from a little different place than you might have thought, but it just fell in this particular time zone of Valentine's Day. So I thought it was a beautiful way to start things off. So the whole idea about loving, and it's not as simple as people might think, because there's such a there's simple descriptions like it's a feeling of showing love or great care, or even really enjoying something. Like I love playing hockey. There's so many with different ways of being loving, and the idea now, the terminology is loving on somebody and being a loving person. So there's lots to investigate here, but we'll do a quick little review and then do some really specific ways of developing this trait in ourselves using things that are not very loving, that are uncomfortable and often distressing, but it can develop great love in us. So back to the description for a minute, there's such in Psych today, they have a lovely long-winded description that it's all about open communication and respect of boundaries and trust and compassion and interest and shared values and all those kinds of things. And that's really sort of typical of the Western European kind of description that wants to sort of deconstruct and mechanize and an attempt to figure things out, and striving for this simple idea that can be applied across everything. And of course, loving doesn't fit in it. Loving does not fit in it at all. But there is something communicated there, that there are so many facets of loving. And part of it is, well, there's a religious sense of it that's worth taking a look at. And it really is like in the Christian scripture, there's something called agape. And agape is love from God and love for God. And it's like considered the highest form of love, contrasted with eros, like erotic kind of love, or philia, like brotherly kind of love or sisterly love. But it's still that same idea of quite an expanded experience. And in Buddhism, of course, there's loving kindness, like practicing kindling loving feeling for people, and compassion, and something they call appreciative joy, which I find a real true thread of loving when we take joy in one another. And the idea of a particular form of equanimity. I'm just gonna mute somebody. And there we go. So this recording is clear. The idea of equanimity, that we love everything equally and everything is okay with us, and getting to that kind of calm level sort of place. So there's so many different qualities of heart sort of described there. What I really want to come down to is what psychiatrist Phil Stutz, and I spoke about him a couple of weeks ago, because the way that he works with forces that he talks about as being beyond us is amazing. And he describes a similar sort of higher force of love that exists beyond individual humans and their interactions, but it can be accessed by us. And he calls it as outflow. And it's very, he describes it in his book, The Tools, almost as a rescue for people when they're tied up in their own difficulties, that if they can open up to that outflow and go beyond themselves to that higher kind of love, that higher force of love, then they can have very different experiences in their lives and turn around really difficult situations, and ones that first of all exist within themselves, and then ones that outside as well. So we'll come on to that a little bit more. And because it takes a lot of courage to actually practice the orientation of loving and being loving in a world that isn't always loving back to us. And it needs to be truly a persistent practice. And I described it in the email that we often maintain these childish means of loving, like reactive loving. Like if you're nice to me, I'll like you. And if you give me what I want, I'll like you. And if you behave in ways that I can agree with, I like you. And so there's a lot of boundaries on that kind of loving. And it's often in response to external cues. So we might feel something in our physical bodies when we see something outside ourselves. And so when we pay attention in that way, it comes and goes with whatever we're exposed to. And that's a different kind of loving, a different experience of loving. The description that Phil Stutz uses is also very much like shamanic practices and those used by biofeedback company HeartMath. They talk about cultivating this energy, and the biofeedback people actually show pictures of how heart energy expands about 3 feet beyond us. And in shamanic practices, there is this road of the heart, and it is being loving in the world. So all beings, and even things that are inanimate, like the directions and the wind and the earth. And so there is a bigger flow of energy that we're talking about tapping into here. So beyond that sort of give and take, and we might even, as you get older, you get sort of more transactional. Like, okay, you were nice to me, and so I'm going to be nice to you because I want to be a loving person, not just because I want you to like me. That's part of it too, but because I want to be that definition of a loving person that I get in my head. And that's not necessarily feeling it. It's just trying to create it. But it's very different than trying to connect with it. Trying to create loving feelings and trying to connect with loving feelings are a little bit different. And so as we do want to do that, we go beyond those sort of guidelines or requirements that we might have from other people. And we actually start looking to see how we can connect with that universal flow of energy and how we can practice aligning with it, because it has a lot of gifts and teachings for us. Living in love means living in this flow. It doesn't mean that we're not unloving at times, because absolutely that happens. But it means that I can open up to this other experience that also can become part of how I am in the world, in my experience. And so because we don't see a lot of that practiced or taught in any sort of practical manner, like math or driving, or practical things that we need in a moment-to-moment living our life, we want to explore it a little more. And so this idea, we have talked before about loving kindness training from Buddhist forums, and that's always useful to look up to, because it sort of primes your mind to that. But what I want to focus on is this Phil Stutz work, because he is so just lovely and practical. And it provides a solution. And love always provides a lot of solutions to things in our lives. If you're hitting that loving place, you get these lovely solutions. So the idea of it is, when we get the cue for it, is some sort of negative interaction, some sort of resentment or dislike or struggle. And usually it's when we might get stuck in reactive or transactional kinds of things. So we might find that the person that we want to be, noticing us or favoring us, maybe they don't. Maybe they're even unkind to us. And that can take us to some other places. And I'm going to bring up his diagram, because I love this man's stickman diagrams too. They are just so amazing. Just a second. I brought it up so I could see it, but not share it with you yet. Just give me a moment. There we go. Okay, so this is, now if someone who's watching could just hold up their thumb if I have that picture in front of them, I would be so thankful. Okay, so this shows like a little person, our stick people that we are. In that moment, we get to make a choice. We get to make a choice of moving into that higher feeling of love and that outflow, that universal love that can carry us beyond what we're feeling right now, onto something else, and that freedom to go on with life, not get stuck. And the one below the line, called the maze, is really a useful drawing of how it is. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but something happens and it may be a trigger to an old idea or an old experience, a memory, or it could be a new thing that happens in this moment that you're not comfortable with or happy with. And you get caught in this maze and you just go in and you can't seem to get out. A moment, please. And you go round and round, and you might even find yourself having this conversation, while you're brushing your teeth in the morning, not with the other person actually there, but just in your own mind about it, or projecting into the future about something you think might happen that you won't like the feeling of. And so what happens when we get into that maze is that our heart gets squished. In shamanic terms, they talk about a shrinking heart because we just have not been using that organ of our body. And so we want to see that as the outflow and open it up. And so your heart literally grows bigger and more open to this flow of life. So this is the picture, and this is the choice that we have. And lots of us go, like, I don't even think about making that kind of choice in that moment. And I don't sit around and plan when I get up, okay, while I'm brushing my teeth, I'll relive that argument I had with my partner. And then when I'm having breakfast, I'm going to review all the possible terrible things that might happen. But lots of times that's how it goes. So we're practicing a non-loving state. So it does take some conscious choice to practice loving and aligning with this other kind of love. And if we do it just of our own will, it's like our heavy lifting, and it's hard. And often it's very tricky to do. Like, okay, I'm not going to be mad at that person. That's called suppression. It doesn't work as well. But the idea of thinking, wow, I'm having this experience that is very unloving. And usually it's unloving with ourselves too. It's not that we're being kind to ourselves at that moment and sticking ourselves in the maze. And we might even be the target of this unloving kind of feeling. I was so stupid I did this thing, or why didn't I do this thing? Or I should have been better at something. So this works whether you have an outside person or it's a general, like idea like the government or those people, whoever those people might be in your particular instance, or this situation. But if you can find a person, and they don't even have to have a face. That is one of the tricks that he uses to get past somebody you're really angry with. You just need a person to send this outflow to. And what you do, and I've outlined this in the email so you can see quite easily how to do it. So you literally just concentrate at your heart, very much like the heart map. And literally imagine. You start with imagining. And with very little practice, most people open up to this feeling. I was working with someone this afternoon and I was just saying, can you send some good feelings to this person? And so she sat down into it, and she'd been in quite a fuss about things and started doing that. And you could see her body change. And she wasn't trying to all of a sudden get out of this upset and unloving state. She was just trying to tune into this higher force of love. And the relaxing came, and then these good ideas about this other person came forward, and they became totally engrossed in that good feeling. And when we were done that part, and they had sent some loving feelings to someone that just needed support, I said, how are you doing? What are your thoughts like right now? How are you feeling in your body? And they said, I feel better. All of those thoughts I was stuck in this morning are gone. I don't feel any pull from them. And this is what we're talking about. This is the magic of the outflow of this kind of higher force love. And the description that Stutz uses in his book, The Tools, about this is about a child, and he remembers himself as a child. No, his friend Michael remembers himself as a child, and he got all upset at something his dad said to him. And so he was sitting in the back seat, you know, giving him the devil eyes and all that sort of thing. And he wasn't, when they got to the place where they were going to go toboggan, he wasn't getting out of the car. He didn't want to go. And, you know, he was just going to stay mad and stay in the car. And then the family finally, you know, tried to get him to go, and they went and had a good time. But while he was sitting in the car, he saw a puppy that was lost. And he felt so worried about the puppy, and he felt an immediate higher flow of love. And that higher flow got that kid out of that car, grabbed the puppy, fell in love with the puppy at the moment, found the parent to get him to help find the puppy's owners. And so that kind of transcending love just resolved everything. And he went on to go on toboggan with his family and have a great day. And remember a really good lesson. And this was as a 5 or 6 year old. And he remembered that entire time. And when he came to learn about Stutz's work, then he passed that story on, because how powerful it had been. So, like I say, this is not an easy task, but really imagining it, going out to the person and going into them, and it rebounds back to us. Like my person that I was working with this afternoon, we are left with this feeling of loving, this increased openness to the world, an open heart, and that feeling of being connected. So a lot of the things we talked about in all those different kinds of definitions come up just automatically when we sign into this higher flow. But it's the rare person. I know a few very devoted Buddhist practitioners that just sit down and practice that. That hasn't been the easiest thing for me in my life. But when I'm driven by my own self-interest because I'm feeling miserable, I'm way more likely to do this. And that really is the beauty of the approach that Stutz uses, because that own self-interest will get us someplace really good for ourselves and for all the people around us. And so this idea of it, just to free our mind from the negative rambling. And it can be such a gift. So many people that I talk to are, you know, still trying to deal with years old stories like that are just stuck with them. And practicing this every time people think about it until they're feeling that movement, that release, and that when that comes up, it doesn't grab them anymore. It doesn't close their heart anymore. We literally train our heart, train our brain to open to that idea. So we're actually flipping the switch. So the one little thing I wanted to talk about was just about the place where people get hooked up, literally, is are we letting people off the hook? So that person was not nice to me. And this does not mean that we go and let ourselves be harassed or things like that, or don't set boundaries or don't look into things. We absolutely do. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to go in and decide about it, about how we are going to be in this moment. And there are so many great outcomes as well. Just gonna stop that share. There we go. There's so many great outcomes because your body feels so much better. The longer you are in that kind of maze, that ruminating, that figuring, trying to revenge, control, etc., it actually makes you ill. It makes your body sick. It makes your brain wire to the default mode network. And the default mode network is literally as it sounds. It just defaults to that and just keeps saying it and doing it over and over and over. And so for you to get out of that, you might want to really think about doing this in a more regular way. Okay, and we're right at that time that we're going to do it in a practice way. So what I will get people to do that are with me live is just get comfortable, and I'm going to have you bring up an idea that just tweaks you a bit. I wouldn't bring up the most difficult thing in your life, but just an idea that tweaks you a bit. And it maybe is something that, that comes up when you're out by yourself or walking. I was sitting in the hospital for a long time by myself this weekend, and I I was going along really well, and it's like, oh, isn't this nice? And then I got a text, and somebody said, well, that's ridiculous that you're waiting that long. And I just started to sort of tip that way, like, no, no. And then I thought, wait a minute. No, no, no. Let's just be open. Let's look around. And literally, I was in a building that I was on a higher floor, and I could see the most beautiful sunrise. And so I could have gone down that, tunnel into the maze very easily, because I had been there 2 days, and I was supposed to go in for day surgery. Day 3, I still hadn't had surgery. And so there was lots of possibility to go down that rabbit hole of the maze. But when I could just open up a little bit and just, okay, have a little bit of loving, and it's like, yeah. And there was people that needed surgery more quickly than I did, for sure. I could see them come in, and I could see their distress, and I could be loving towards them and wishing them well, and I can wait. And so it moved to a neutral, and then to a really, truly loving space, watching that sunrise come up. So little things that you're in, just pick something. Take a few deep breaths, always. That's going to be the instruction, because we also hold that resistance to loving in our bodies. Our minds say, no, that's not really true. It could be like that for other people, but it's not like that for me. Or this person was like that for me, and I don't want to let go of that. And just tightens up our bodies. So if you take those breaths and literally just get comfortable, you might want to put your hand on your heart and just imagine. You might float up, or you might find that flow of love, that energy. It might come off the earth for you. It might be a bright light. Doesn't matter. Just open up and allow yourself to imagine a bit. And you tweak that imagining until it works for you. And then see where you want to send it, whether that's to yourself when you're in an upset state, or to another person that you've had a conflict with. Or in my case right now, a pet that's kind of whining a lot. And just send that out. And let it flow through you, and flow through you, and flow through you until it fills you. Fills up your heart, moves on through, overflows. This higher flow literally fills you up and overflows you. And send it anywhere you might want to your target person or beyond. You might see it filling up beyond that person, to other people. And it might now start to flow back to you and fill you again and wash over you, just releasing any more little moments where you're clenching or resisting, or even little spaces where you might not be believing. Just like you might check for dust on things. Let that love flow across you. across your space. And for the people live with me, just enjoy that for a few more minutes. And for those of you that are watching tonight, I hope you've had a very loving day and can use this loving practice to good purpose, to fill up all those cracks and crevices in your life where resentment might just move in, where anger might pull you over. And use it so much that your brain becomes more accustomed to sending out a loving response than getting into the maze. And I thank you so much for joining us on Valentine's or after, whenever you're seeing this video. And I'll close with our usual closing, but remind people that they can ask questions, give donations, or look for more information at scientistsage@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be. Good night.